Good day, everybody, and welcome to my latest episode on retirement in Malaysia, buying properties in Malaysia. And today's topic is a very interesting headline, a bit of a clickbait, but yeah, JB is dangerous and other myths and realities of living in Johor Bahru. So I chose this topic because I've been watching a lot of YouTube recently, different channels on YouTube, and I noticed that there are some common myths, like I call it myths, half-truths, that people talk about when they about JB, right? Some of it is this absolute bullshit nonsense, right? Some is based on a bit of reality. So let me give my 2 cents to try and address some of this, right? And give you what are some of the myths and realities of living in JB. Number one is the most oftenly heard that JB is a very dangerous place to be. And whenever I hear this, normally the first thing that comes to my mind is that the person who say this, normally they haven't gone to JB in a very long time, right? If you ask them, hey, have you been to JB recently? They will say, oh no, I haven't been in years. Some haven't been prior to COVID. Some have some when they were a child, this kind of thing, right? And then or they read newspaper, read a newspaper article, they give them this kind of impression, right? So or some friend, somebody told them something, right? Where somebody read somewhere, hear something. So normally this type of people who say, hey, JB safe or not? JB dangerous or not? Like I said, normally have not been to JB recently. Now millions of trips are done by Singaporeans to JB every year. Millions, literal millions, right? If JB is so dangerous, right, you wouldn't have millions of trips happening every year, right? Our border wouldn't be so jammed. Even during the school holidays, right? School holidays, whether like the recent March school holiday or the December school holidays or the June school holidays, it wouldn't be so jammed, right? Because a lot of Singaporeans or people from Singapore go to JB all the time, right? And of course, there are a handful of crime cases we will not deny. But I think JB is as safe as any city, any general city in Southeast Asia. I don't think JB is more dangerous than KL, more dangerous than Penang. It's the same, right? I don't see why all this commotion about JB being dangerous or not, right? And of course, if you compare to Singapore, Singapore is a lot safer, right? That cannot be denied. Singapore is probably one of the safest countries in the world, right? It's very difficult to beat Singapore from that perspective. But I mean, if you compare the JB to Bangkok or to Manila or Jakarta, I mean, I don't see why people say JB is dangerous, right? Do you say that Jakarta is dangerous or do you say that Bangkok is dangerous? No, right? I mean, we always say JB is dangerous because I guess one of the reasons because JB is so near to Singapore. So whenever got one case happens, right, it appears in the Singapore media and everybody hoo-ha or Reddit, right? So Singapore is so small, so everybody's exposed to JB quite a fair bit. But like I said, JB is as safe as it is, right? I have lived in JB, go to JB for many years, and I think countless of Singaporeans and other people who go to JB hardly experience any crime. If you really want to compare, right, I think JB or Malaysia is generally safer than Europe. I mean, in JB you don't have things like pickpocket, or people trying to, pickpocket you, right? I mean, I've seen people in Europe, this is a very common thing that happened to Asians, right? People try to pickpocket you. And then in US, they have openly use of guns, right? Whereas in Malaysia, we don't have open use of guns, right? Southeast Asia generally don't have. So, I mean, if you compare from that perspective, I think Malaysia overall and JB is as safe as any average country out there. And my final suggestion is if you really think JB is dangerous, but you're interested to explore this retirement lifestyle or this lifestyle, holiday lifestyle in JB, go and visit JB more often, right? It's very easy. Go to booking.com, Airbnb, go and book a hotel, book a Airbnb. Just go and stay a few nights over the weekend. Keep repeat doing this, right? And you get a feel whether JB is dangerous or not, right? If you go today on TikTok, on YouTube, right? You just go and search things to do in JB. There are lots of videos on TikTok, on YouTube, on Instagram, made by Singaporeans, yeah? Young Singaporeans usually, of course, because only young people do that, right? Make lots of videos being made about what to do in JB, where to eat, where to shop, etc. I don't even do that myself because already a lot of people are doing it. They do it better than me. I don't think I can do their level of creativity or explore as much as them. So I let them do it. There's lots of people going to JB. Go and explore for yourself. Decide if JB is really dangerous or not. If you're really so scared of JB, right? JB so dangerous, and then I think stay in Singapore. Of course, Singapore is very safe, right? I mean, then it's very hard to travel because everywhere is so dangerous, right? But I mean, like I said, I always laugh about it. And normally, like I said, people who make this kind of statement are people who usually don't go to JB recently. Another way, of course, I think general tips to avoid crime is, again, tips to avoid crime in any place. Don't do stupid things, right? Normally, people who get exposed to crime, right? Number one, they like to put back on top of their car. I saw the most recent case when somebody put their laptop in the car. This kind of things should open you to being targeted, right? I mean, sometimes I think in Singapore we are too safe already, so people don't realize that things they're doing in Singapore is actually in other countries are considered a bit not safe to do, right? So, but these are very common sense thing actually in many countries. You go Thailand, you go Malaysia, you also don't do these kind of things. But yeah, don't. I would normally advise don't leave valuable things in your car, right? Even if your house, right? Most people will not have valuable things in your house. How valuable things can be in your house, right? But I mean, in your car, typically the most common thing that will happen, right? These are small tips I can say to avoid getting into trouble, right? In Malaysia or any Southeast Asian country, anywhere actually. Even in Europe, you try and leave your, but in Europe you don't drive, that's why you don't experience this. The next myth is that somehow there is a Singapore price and a Malaysia price. When you go and buy something, right? Oh, you are Singaporean, I charge you Singapore higher price. Or you are Malaysian, so I give you Malaysia cheaper price. Some people go to a shop in Malaysia and they think got such thing on Singaporean price and Malaysian price. I think if I'm the storekeeper, I also don't have time to think what is Singapore price, what is Malaysia price. But of course, I feel that where this thing comes from, because there are some things that Singaporeans prefer to buy, right? Singaporean generally, if you go to Malaysia, they like to pay for the premium item, the better item. So you go like to those Hai Di Lao, Shabu Shabu, some of the branded cafes or that, right? Singaporeans are a lot more willing to pay for premium items. So maybe sometimes to the average Malaysian, you see that, oh, you pay so much for this, right? Because it's higher, it's a high price item, right? From a Malaysian perspective, but of course for Singapore, it's very value for money compared to Singapore. So in that sense, of course, there are places where Singaporeans prefer to go, right? And maybe these places become labeled as Singaporean or tourist places, right? Versus places that Malaysians may not go, or Malaysians may go to other places, right? So I think this is where this issue of Singaporean price and Malaysian price come from, right? But I assure you, no storekeeper sit there and say, oh, you Malaysian, I give you one price, you Singaporean, I give you one price. Nobody does that one, okay? Like I said, of course, some shops, they are more catered to tourists and to Singaporeans, yes, right? They sell items, of course, they price higher, and generally they give more value because they know that the buyer wants more premium item, right? So that's probably as much as it goes, right? For property also, there's no such thing as Singaporean price and Malaysia price. Generally, all property developers sell property got one price one. Of course, there's certain fees that Singaporeans or foreigners may have to pay. Some taxes that typically Singaporean may have to pay extra. Depend on the project. Some project the developer may absorb. Some project the developer may not absorb, right? But there's always that one price one. There's no two price even for real estate for Singaporean or Malaysian. The third thing that you might hear is that, oh, if you go to JB, don't drive expensive car, right? You drive expensive car, people will target you or rob you. I think, again, I think that's another myth. Do you know how many Mercedes in Singapore are sold in Malaysia every year? I think Malaysia sells annually around 9 to 10,000 BMWs and another 9 to 10,000 Mercedes, around this range, 9 to 10,000 each brand per year. Singapore only 1 year only sell maybe 3,000 plus BMW or Mercedes each, right? So in Malaysia, double the amount of cars. Luxury brands, right? There are luxury brand cars that are sold in Malaysia, right? I drive a BMW in Malaysia. It's a Singapore plate, so I don't think anything has happened to my car before, other than the odd scratch or that from in Malaysian traffic. But yeah, I mean, if you worry about driving a nice car in Malaysia, right? Lots of Malaysians who drive nice car in Malaysia also cannot drive. I think a lot of businessmen, self-employed in Malaysia drive nice cars, right? Some of our property agents in Malaysia drive very nice cars. So I don't think car is a problem, right? We always hear this thing, oh, go to Malaysia, don't be so flashy. No, it's okay to be flashy. I think a lot of Malaysians in Malaysia like to be flashy, right? If you people watch on TikTok, Instagram, right, there are even a lot of Malaysians who are flashy, right? So I don't think that's necessarily the case, right? I think it's more of common sense on how to protect yourself in terms of don't be too exposed to crime, right? But it's okay to drive a nice car, right? I have a Singaporean friend, he goes to JB quite a lot. He owns a property in Danga Bay. It's a holiday home, right, for him. Last time I told him can buy car very cheap. Yeah, I said buy car very cheap. I thought he would buy a mid-range car. He go and buy an Audi TT, okay? Audi TT, right? And yeah, it's very safe. I don't think anything has happened to his car before. He probably still owns the car. Yeah, so don't be afraid to drive nice cars in Malaysia. A lot of Malaysians own nice cars, right, in Malaysia. Whether Singapore plate or Malaysia plate, don't be afraid, okay? Police or civil servant in Malaysia is inefficient and corrupt. I think there is some basis in this. Even we as a Malaysians, we also complain about police and civil service. Generally, the problem, like most third world countries, is that the civil service in general are very lowly paid, right? if you ask me, they're also overworked, right? There's a lot of things for them to do, a lot of problems to solve, and for the amount of money they're paid, of course, they feel very demoralized, right? Of course, it's an iron rice bowl scenario, right? Civil servants generally do not get fired, right? So that's why a lot of them are attracted to the civil service in the first place. But yeah, they are paid too low, and when they're paid too low, then it opens up the issue of corruption, right? And that's where you hear the corruption cases happen, right? Which is prevalent in not just in Malaysia, but a lot of third world countries in Asia, right? And I think one thing, if you are personally in the case where you say you run the scenario that the civil service or police or whatever is asking you for bribe, my general advice is don't pay, right? If you want to summon you lah. So what, right? I mean, challenging to summon you, issue the paper, right? Do not give in to this culture of corruption, right? If you need to go and report it, right? Remember the guy's number, go and report it, right? Don't be afraid. I think if you give in to the culture of corruption, then you encourage corruption ultimately. So do not. My advice is do not, right? In many cases, sometimes they will not even summon you because they don't want the hassle, they don't want the time. They also worry that you will report them. So don't give in, right? Sometimes when I read the news, but people, police officer ask for bribe or that, and I'm very surprised all these people go and pay the bribe, right? Why you pay? Don't pay lah, right? You pay, then you encourage it, right? So don't pay. Next is that internet in Malaysia or in JB is very bad. I say this is the one, when I saw this comment, I was like, huh? Internet in Malaysia is very bad. I think internet reliability, definitely Singapore is number one, right? In terms of reliability, but I think a lot of Asian countries, Southeast Asia in particular, they are not too far behind. I mean, our internet is up most of the time. I think we rarely have outage issues in Malaysia, although, of course, I think Singapore is still better in that perspective. And if you look at this chart here, I'm flashing on the screen right now, you can see that you can get up to 100 Mbps, which is really quite fast. For a very low amount, not even $50 a month. Yeah, not even $50 things a month, right? All the way, if you really want fast internet, right, just under $100 a month for the 2 GB per second, right? This is from a service provider in JB, in Malaysia. So I think internet speeds in Malaysia can be quite fast. So I don't know why people make statement internet in JB very slow. I don't know where you get that idea from. Next point is you need a car to live in Malaysia. Yes and no. Yes, I mean Malaysia is a car country, much like in the US. So practically everyone has a car. It's very common in Malaysia for one household to have multiple cars. So in that sense, yeah, it's a car dependent society, right? A lot of us use cars in Malaysia. But then again, from a Singaporean perspective, especially if you're a retiree looking to live in Malaysia, you don't necessarily need to own a car. Like, if you can drive a car, it's the best. But if you feel that in your old age you cannot, right? Use Grab. I mean, Grab in Malaysia is fairly affordable. If you live in a suburb or in the city center, Grab one way to most directions should not be 10-15 ringgit, more than that per direction one way, which is, I think, is very affordable if you compare to, say, Singapore, right? If you stay in JB City, you can get to any direction for 10 to 15 ringgit 10 to 15 ringgit one way. I was in JB last week at 6 p.m, which is considered rush hour, right? On a weekday, I took a Grab from town center to Danga Bay for only 8 ringgit, yeah, 8 ringgit, right? And I'm sure you can get to KSL for around the same price, maybe 10 ringgit maximum. So it's very affordable Grab in Malaysia, so do use Grab. Grab is also very safe because of app tracks where you are. Buses, there are some buses in Malaysia, but they are generally not as reliable. Some areas the bus services are better than the rest, but I mean, unless you get familiar with the bus, I mean, I don't really suggest you use a bus if you're Singaporean or retiring in Malaysia. Just use a Grab, right? But if you can buy a car, do buy a car, right? I think I do cover about cars in another video on my YouTube, right? Do find out how much a car costs and why you should get a car if you are the one that still want to drive. Malaysia medical treatment is no good or bad, poor quality. Okay, this is another weird statement, right? Generally, this again comes from people who are normally quite not exposed, right? Because, yeah, if you're Singaporean, how often do you go to Malaysia to get medical treatment, right? So you don't know lah, so you assume it's bad, right? That's generally what happens. Of course, Singapore is number one. We are not disputing this. Lots of people come to Singapore to get medical treatment, but it's also pricey. Yeah, of course, a lot of political figures, etc., you know, very famous, like to come to Singapore. Singapore had the best quality doctors and all that, but of course, Singapore is expensive, right? But if you can get in Malaysia what I call value for money, right? I think this chart which I show you here, ranks like within ASEAN, right, the quality of medical services, and Malaysia is not too bad. Thailand, I think within Southeast Asia, Thailand and Malaysia are normally known very well for the value for money in terms of medical services, right? If you guys know also, I did a Channel News Asia video with Talking Point, where lots of Singaporeans go to Malaysia to buy prescription medicines, right? Because you can get it for a fraction of the price. Same product, fraction of the price. So a lot of Singaporeans do that today, and that's just for medicines. Yeah, we haven't talked about things like what do you call dental services, non-urgent procedures, right? Like for example, giving birth, right? I've seen a lot of Singaporeans go to Malaysia to do pre-medical, what call it, pre-birth checks as well, right? You can also like not important surgeries, right? You can always do it, or non-important health checks, right? Like your annual health check, you can do it in Malaysia, right? A lot of people do it. If you are really so concerned about the quality, you can always go back to Singapore, right? That's one of the beautiful things about living in JB, that Singapore is so near, right? If for anything very important, right, life-threatening kind of thing, if you don't trust Malaysia, you can always go back to Singapore, right? But my point is, quality of healthcare in Malaysia is actually quite high, right? If you don't believe me, go and try it out. I would suggest something which is quite safe. Dental. I do my dental in Malaysia, in JB, right? I find that I pay half the price for very good quality dental, right? Dental is something that you can do without the, not so important thing that you can do in Malaysia. So go and try it out, right? And then you go and try other things, right? Like I said, go to hospital if you're elderly, go and see what you can scans and stuff like that, right? You will find that it's a lot affordable in Malaysia, and actually the quality they get is not bad at all. Okay, so that is definitely a myth when people say that Malaysian medical quality is very bad. It's actually very good. Final one is Malaysians cannot speak English. This one also baffles me sometimes when people say, "Oh, Malaysian English very bad." Huh? English very bad? Then again, okay. Actually, this chart shows you within ASEAN, right? Where Malaysia ranks. I think within Southeast Asia, Malaysia ranked number 3, behind Singapore and the Philippines in terms of English proficiency. If you think Malaysian English is bad, then obviously you have not been to Thailand or Vietnam, right, or Cambodia or Indonesia, where their English proficiency is even lower, or even other parts of the world, right, South America, other parts of Asia, right, even in Korea or Japan, right, English can be quite bad in these countries, China, okay. So actually Malaysian English not bad. I mean, part of that is because we are also a former British colony, just like Singapore, so we still have a lot of English institutions in our culture, right? So that says that Malaysian can speak English to some extent. I mean, it's not perfect. Again, definitely Singapore is better. There's also a reason why a lot of Malaysians work in Singapore, because a lot can speak English. I am Malaysian, and my English okay now, right? So yeah. In the worst case, I think a lot of Malaysians, if they cannot really speak well, at least they understand you, right, to some extent, right? Very rare you will find a Malaysian that hear you talk English, right, and then totally don't understand you, 100% don't understand you. I think very rare thing. Most Malaysians will understand you to some level. They may not be able to reply you very well in the worst case scenario, but most Malaysians will understand English to some extent. So there's Malaysian English language proficiency number 3 in Southeast Asia. I think in this chart it's quite high, also ranked 25 or not globally out of 100 countries surveyed. So I think that's pretty good already. So go to Malaysia, you will find that language is not as big a problem as you think. So thank you very much. I think that wraps up my myths and realities of living in Malaysia. I hope that was interesting and useful to you. If you are someone who is considering to retire or live in Malaysia, I hope that point was useful, right? Especially if you haven't come to Malaysia a long time, or you have some preconceptions that you're not clear in your mind, right? Generally, a lot of you who watch my channel today are already somewhat proficient in Malaysia and go to JB quite often. So I do this video for those people who are new and still quite new to JB maybe, right? I hope that helps. Okay, if you enjoy our content, do like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I try to create content as much as possible that's value add to you, whether it comes to living and retiring in Malaysia or buying real estate in Malaysia. Thank you very much. Please hit the like and like and subscribe button, and do share with your friends as well the link. Thank you very much, and bye bye.